Hi, I'm Jordi Cruyff, and I would like to explain my signing for Manchester United in 1996. In the summer, I played the European Championships in England in '96 with the Netherlands. In a 4-3-3, I played on the right wing. But also in that same season, I played with Barcelona in the Champions League against Manchester United. So I think that the club have been seeing me. After the European Championships, we're kind of studying what options is the best for me, together with my father, like brainstorming what would be a logical step. At that time, Atletico Madrid, who won the double in Spain, they were interested with Radomir Antic. Also, another club in Spain from who I thought the rivalry was a little bit too tough for a 21-year-old, so I thought that would not be a very good idea. So we started to look abroad. Ajax, through their players in the national team during the summer, already were kind of talking about the option that Ajax would be interested. And it went developing in a serious conversation until during the weekend, we kind of were thinking that Ajax would be the next step, and we were supposed to travel to Amsterdam on a Monday morning to sign. It was the Ajax under Louis van Gaal. And then in the weekend, I think on a Saturday, we received a phone call from Manchester United, who at that time had a lot of young players in the squad, with the manager, Ferguson, of course, who was really giving the time and playing time and giving very good development to these young players. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a chat. There were board members, and Ferguson traveled to Barcelona. And we met in my parents' house, and I must say the offer was good, the vibe was very good, the plan was very good, and especially when I looked at all the young players. There was the Neville brothers, there was Nicky Butt, there was Beckham, there was Scholes. I mean, there was 5-6 young players of similar age who were like breaking through the ranks, getting a lot of minutes. So I think that was a very convincing story. So instead of flying to Amsterdam, I found myself flying to Manchester a few days after. And of course, England, very difficult and different football than what Spain is. In Spain, it was more the passing style, less physical. And in England, it was, every game is a battle, and every game there's different weapons to win the game. Like sometimes it was more direct, sometimes it would be through the sides, sometimes it would be through the middle. It was a very tough, difficult league, especially the physical part, a lot of transitions. When you've played in Spain, and that's always what you've kind of had, the Dutch football and the Spanish football, England was a difficult step. The system we went in at United was more a kind of a 4-4-2 system. With here in the middle, two players who had a lot of physical power. Of course, Roy Keane, a lot of times was Nicky Butt here. You had Peter Schmeichel, who was, a big, like a boss in his 16, but also with a very long ball, that if it was difficult to build up, we could play a direct one, win the second ball here, and then arrive from the sides. Of course, I came as a winger, left or right. In the first games, I played up front, but eventually with the time, I was not probably the typical striker to play against very strong central defenders. It was maybe not the characteristics I had for that kind of football. So I ended up playing more on the wings. But of course, if you look at the squad and you see you have Ryan Giggs on one side and Beckham on the other side, then you already know that it's not going to be an easy ride in terms of getting the prime minutes, because they are, probably two of the better players in Europe at that moment. In the midfield, because it was only two playing, the difference was in Barcelona we would have always 3 or 4. So these players were players who really had the physical capacity to arrive at the back, to help the defense, to arrive at the front, to help on the sides. One was Roy Keane, who was, for me, one of the probably biggest surprises. I think was an unbelievable player. And it's one of those players that I would always love to have in my team. as a leader, as the one who always goes in front in the battle. Not easy sometimes because he had a crazy drive to win, also in the trainings, but yeah, I would always have one of those in my team. Here was Nicky Butt, but also you had Paul Scholes, who were allowed to arrive, and who, especially Paul Scholes, was very good in arriving to the second line. So if the strikers were here, Beckham would have a cross, Giggs would be here, of course, Scholes. Everything that he would get in these positions, you already knew there was a big chance he would end up in the back of the net. For me, he was also one of my favorite players, Scholes, because he really had absolutely everything, but he could be tough. He could be tough in the duels, in the tackles, but his passing and his shooting capacity was top draw. But especially what impressed me the most was his timing of getting in the box. He was never too late or too early. He always had the right timing. He always knew that when Beckham was crossing, he always knew where he had to be in the box, and that's why he scored, of course, so many goals. On the wing, two different kind of players. You had Beckham, who didn't really have to dribble because he had such an amazing cross. He could just cross the ball this way, cross the ball that way. He could curve it. So for him, it wasn't necessary to reach here and then dribble and to cross. He didn't need to dribble. And of course, you had Giggs, who was one of those players that I think if he would be playing in the Spanish league, he would be one of the absolute fans' favorites, because the abilities that he had, his dribbling capacities in and out, always looking for the vertical ball behind the space. This was one of those players that in Spain, people come to the stadium for. I think it was an amazing team. In my first year, I had, I would even say, the honor to be together with Eric Cantona, who was, of course, a huge legend, but also as a person, amazing person. I remember when we arrived in the first week, we were 4 or 5 new foreigners. I think Solskjaer was also one of them. He used to pick us up in the hotel to bring us to the trainings, and he had certain things that I think, all the mystery that he has as a football player, he was just a great person outside the pitch, helpful to young foreigners to understand that we were kind of trying to adapt and finding our way. He would be one of the players to guide us through the process. So I'm very grateful to him that such a big star was actually so human towards young players. And I really appreciate it until the day of today. I never forgot that, the one that you most look up to is actually the one who's helping the young guys. And I think it's a great example of leadership. Also in the front was Andy Cole, of course. You had Solskjaer. United was just a very good team. A lot of young talent, but also a lot of character, knowing how to adapt to different games. Sometimes it was direct. Sometimes it would be through the side. Sometimes, and actually many times, it was through the middle. Long ball to Cantona. He had an amazing capacity to control the ball with the chest, and before you knew, Scholes was already here to shoot from the second line. But it was, for me, the first time that I came in a kind of a 4-4-2 situation. Sometimes it would be also a little bit like this in the European games, but normally, because of the characteristics of the players, it would always end up being a 4-4-2 system. For me, it was an adaptation of different kind of football, from learning in a younger age the Dutch kind of, the Dutch style of playing. Then we went to the Barcelona in the youth and in the first team, the style of playing, and then to reach in a 4-4-2, which it gave us great success. It was maybe not so much on personal level, but as a team, it was a very good 4 years over there with a lot of titles, and I think people still talk about that team. But especially, I think it was Ferguson had a very good eye for bringing young players in, for understanding rotation. For me, he was one of the first coaches who had rotation ideas, and I remember that I came from a culture where in the training every day, you need to show that you deserve to play in the weekend. And then Ferguson would come to me and he said, Jordi, in 2 weeks, start preparing yourself, because in 2 weeks' time, you're going to play. And I remember I was 21 and, kind of a curious guy. And I remember asking him, I said, but, that's in 3 games time. So what if this player and this player score a hat-trick each? How are you going to put me in? And then he said, okay, that's, I was 21. He would say, that's my problem. Like, kind of telling me to just get ready and in 2 weeks you'll play and I'll figure out how to do it. But I must say that he was really a master in knowing when he had to, or when he would need these players in certain times of the year. So he would already prepare November to keep certain players fresh for when, the congestion of fixtures would come in December and in January, that he would have the players fresh, especially already knowing which opponents it would be. So that was my kind of the first time that I understood that, managers are not only thinking about the next game, but they're actually in their mind already thinking about the next and even the next after. So I think I learned a lot about Ferguson, and especially when I got a bit older in my career and when I started to coach myself, then I understood that he was actually really ahead of his time in many things that he used to do and many decisions that he used to make. And I catch myself a lot of times like remembering some of the things that he told me when I'm actually speaking to a player, and you can just imagine that already 30 years have passed, but still a lot of his way of planning and thinking are still present in nowadays football. So I think at a young age I've been very fortunate and lucky to have been with, coaching under my father, who, as you all know, was kind of a revolutionary. I would even say a lot of people thought he was crazy when they would see his lineup, until there was a moment they just said, okay, this guy's a genius, because he really changed things in the world of football. But I really think it was a helpful time in my period, and it was a real, pleasure and honor to work under these 2 coaches at such a young age and to be in these 2 unbelievable clubs.